In the last, chaotic days of World War II, one of the Navy's proudest ships was handed a mission of absolute secrecy. She pulled it off perfectly, only to then suffer one of the worst naval disasters in U.S. history. This is the story of the USS Indianapolis.
Just think about that for a second. A 610-foot heavy cruiser, a ship that had fought in 10 major campaigns, just disappeared. For 4 straight days, nobody even knew she was gone. We're going to break down how something like that could possibly happen and the devastating price that was paid for all that silence.
And this is the real cost. Out of a crew of nearly 1,200 sailors and Marines, 880 men never made it home. Their story is honestly one of unimaginable horror, but it's also a story of unbelievable courage and a fight for justice that took more than 50 years to win.
To really understand the disaster, we have to rewind the clock about 2 weeks before the sinking. It all started with a mission so secret, the ship's own captain had no idea what he was carrying.
You can just imagine the buzz on board. The crew is watching as this massive crate gets welded right onto the deck, and they're all placing bets on what's inside. Is it special toilet paper for General MacArthur? Some new secret weapon? Nobody, not a single person, guessed it was the actual core of the atomic bomb that was about to be dropped on Hiroshima.
Captain McVeigh was basically told one thing: every hour you save will help shorten the war. And man, he took that to heart. The Indianapolis just tore across the Pacific. It set a speed record from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor that, get this, still stands today. After successfully delivering its top-secret cargo, the ship was sent on what was supposed to be just a routine trip to the Philippines for some training.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a really dark turn. Because of this intelligence gap, the Navy had this top-secret code-breaking program, right? It was called Ultra, and they knew there were Japanese subs hunting right along the Indianapolis's path. They even knew another American ship had been sunk there just days earlier, but to protect their code-breaking secret, they told Captain McVeigh nothing. He was told he was sailing into safe waters. His request for a destroyer escort? Denied. He sailed right into a kill zone, completely blind.
So the same secrecy that had protected the atomic bomb's components had now, tragically, sealed the ship's fate. As the Indianapolis sailed on alone, a hunter was lying in wait in the darkness.
And that hunter was Commander Hashimoto, captain of the Japanese submarine I-58. Right after 11 o'clock at night, the clouds parted, the moon came out, and it perfectly silhouetted this massive American cruiser. For Hashimoto, it was the perfect target, just served up on a silver platter.
Hashimoto fired 6 torpedoes. 2 of them hit home. The first was just catastrophic. It literally tore the front 65 feet of the ship clean off. But the second was the death blow. It slammed into the side right near a fuel tank and a powder magazine. A massive pillar of fire shot into the sky, and instantly all power on the ship died. Just complete darkness and chaos.
The violence of it all was just overwhelming. From that first explosion to the moment the ship's stern lifted straight up into the air and slid under the waves, it took only 12 minutes. 12! About 300 men went down with her. Almost 900 more were thrown into the pitch-black open ocean.
And you'd think the sinking was the worst part, but for the men who made it off the ship, scattered for miles in that oily water, the real nightmare was just getting started.
I mean, it is just impossible to imagine the hell they went through. During the day, the sun was so blistering it literally burned their skin and cooked their brains. At night, the cold was so bone-chilling it sent them into hypothermia. But the absolute worst enemy was thirst. Men were driven so mad by dehydration they started drinking the salt water, which of course just made them die faster. And all the while, day and night, there were the sharks.
Now, the shark attacks were without a doubt a constant and visceral terror. But this chart makes a really grim but important point. The vast, vast majority of the men who died in the water, they died from the elements. Dehydration, exposure, drinking that salt water. They were in a race against the clock, and the clock was about to run out. So the big question is, why didn't anyone come looking for them? And the answer is just this infuriating cascade of failures. There were SOS signals sent, but they were ignored. People thought they were Japanese tricks. Then, a new rule meant that the ship's arrival in the Philippines didn't have to be reported, and most unbelievably, there was no system in place to automatically check on a warship that was overdue. The USS Indianapolis had, for all intents and purposes, procedurally ceased to exist.
After 4 days, the survivors were spotted by pure dumb luck. A pilot just happened to see them.
But their rescue wasn't the end of the story. For their captain, the final gut-wrenching tragedy was just about to begin.
So when the war finally ends, the news about the Indy breaks, and the American public is furious. How could this happen? The Navy had a massive PR disaster on its hands, and they needed a fall guy, a scapegoat to take the blame for all the systemic screw-ups. They chose Captain Charles McVeigh. In a move that is just beyond belief, the Navy flew Commander Hashimoto, the Japanese sub-captain, all the way from Japan to testify against McVeigh. The whole case was built on the idea that McVeigh shouldn't have stopped his zigzagging maneuver, but Hashimoto's testimony should have blown the case wide open. He said, flat out, I would have sunk him anyway, zigzagging or not. The court? They just ignored him. And they found him guilty. Let that sink in for a minute. Of all the thousands of ships that were sunk in combat in all of American history, Captain McVeigh is the one and only commander to ever be court-martialed for losing his ship to an enemy attack.
Now, his sentence was eventually set aside, but the conviction itself, that stain on his record, it stood. For the next 23 years, he was haunted. He received hate mail from the families of the men who died, blaming him. He was forced to carry the guilt for the entire Navy, and in 1968, tormented by this incredible moral injury, Captain McVeigh took his own life.
For decades, it really seemed like that's where this awful story would end, with injustice. But the survivors, the men who served under him, they never gave up the fight for their captain. And their cause found a champion in the most unlikely of places. You've probably seen the movie Jaws, right? You know this famous speech. Well, in 1996, a 12-year-old kid named Hunter Scott sees the movie and he's totally captivated. He decides to do a school history project on the real story. And when he found out that the captain had been court-martialed, he couldn't believe it. What started as a school project turned into an actual crusade, and it was this amazing team effort. Scott tracked down and interviewed 150 survivors, uncovering all this evidence that had been suppressed. The survivors, totally energized by this kid, they took their 50-year-long fight straight to Congress. And then, in this incredible act of reconciliation, Commander Hashimoto himself wrote a letter to the U.S. Senate, pleading with them to clear McVeigh's name.
The combined weight of all that testimony was just undeniable. More than 55 years after the ship went down, and 32 years after his suicide, the U.S. Congress finally passed a resolution, signed into law, that officially exonerated Captain McVeigh. The debt of honor was at long last paid.
Today, the wreck of the Indianapolis rests 3.5 miles below the surface of the Philippine Sea. It's a protected war grave. The captain's name is finally cleared. But the story stands as this powerful, chilling warning, and it leaves us with one really big question to think about. What is the true cost of secrecy, even when it's for what seems like the right reasons?
And so, another chapter closes. For more journeys into history's forgotten files, please like and subscribe. Your next story awaits.